Hello, 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 and welcome to the Spiritual Interactive Panel. I am your host, Kevin Ross Emery, and we are here as we are here every month with a new spiritual panel, spiritual interactive panel. I'm going to introduce you to today's guest in just a minute. And they will actually they're going to introduce you to you because I figure they can introduce themselves better than I can introduce them. I'd be this Tweedledee, this Tweedledum, go for it. So instead of doing that, I'm going to let both Benjamin and Raina introduce themselves. They're going to also talk about what is their connection with uh, today's topic, which is what is spiritual abuse. And this is a topic very near and dear to my heart, as it is to both of my panelists today. We were going to have a third panelist, and unfortunately, she was stricken ill last night and is unable to join us today. But you are in good hands, I assure you. What I do want to remind people of here is that we are coming from places where we will completely agree, and there are places where we're going to have completely different perspectives. And it's important to understand that this isn't about anybody being right or being wrong. It's about somebody who is a spiritual teacher and healer who has spent time and energy doing and being with people and having experienced themselves some form of spiritual abuse. And they're going to be sharing that with you. And then at the end, we'll be taking questions. You can start asking your questions whenever you want, though, I'm not going to interrupt somebody's flow to ask a question. But if somebody finishes speaking and somebody else is getting ready and there's a question, we'll just throw it in. But we will put time at the end to ask questions. You can type your questions in, whether you're watching us on either of the Facebook channels or if you're watching us on YouTube. So it's important to understand that any conversation can literally be triggering. We don't know what somebody's triggers are, but somebody can be triggered because of any number of reasons. If somebody says something here that does for some reason trigger you, we want to respect and honor that trigger. We also want you to be self-aware enough that if you can feel yourself getting really upset by something, that you just at least take a deep breath, try and center, think about what is the question you want to ask. And I always say to everybody who ever sits with me and these two other panelists today, they get stuck with it because they're stuck with me, which is don't ask questions you don't want answers to. If you know something's a hot button, don't set us up by diving into a hot button and then getting all upset about it. We don't want to in any way diminish your experience or make you feel like you cannot be heard. In that, I ask that you take a deep breath and present it as respectfully as possible. So if you do have a lot of energy about something, really take a deep breath, center, and kind of do your best to present it so it doesn't come across that any of the panelists feel like they're being attacked or that somehow they're suddenly responsible, for you melting down. And meltdowns happen. And all three of us here have, between us, we've got, I don't know, well over 50 years of experience dealing with people and triggers and stuff like that. But we also want that to be something that you may choose to reach out to one of us after the sip and go into it further. And to be reminded, we do this as a community service. There's free. This is free. It doesn't cost you anything. We do this to serve you, but we also all make our living by talking about these conversations, working with people around them, and things like this. So if you do reach out to somebody, I would like you to reach out with a mentality. I'm going to respect their time. I'm going to book their time because this is what they're doing for a living. So that being said, I am going to start. I also want to start by saying, I'm going to say it at the beginning and at the end. Our next sip is at 6 p.m. on, it's a Monday, 7:15. It is What is Indigeneity? Raina can correct my pronunciation afterwards. And it will be Raina, Nancy Smith, and Sam Rochette and myself. So I just want to put that in at the beginning. I'll do it again at the end. And now I'm going to pass it over to the mistress of the Pearl's Flame, Reverend Raina.
Hi there. Yeah, thank you, Kevin. So, yeah, I'm just dropping into the energy of this. It is a pretty important topic to me. What is spiritual abuse? Having gone through, my own lived experience, and I just wanted to it's important for me here to also just express, we're in this all together, and I'm really appreciating this opportunity to create connection around this, because connection heals. Spiritual abuse is relational wounding. So relational wounds need relational healing. And so like my connection to this topic, I'm a shamanic spiritual guide, embodiment somatic coach, part of this sort of shamanic initiation path that I've been on. This sort of path just opens up, just an intensive journey that just reveals, among other things, just all the ways people can do harm as well as be harmed. It creates a field of experience that really helps one who is of this sort of shamanic wiring or beingness to develop consciousness and expand it in such a way just to more skillfully navigate challenges with increasing skill and heart, compassion, and integrating sky and earth more deeply, spirit and body, right? Just weaving these together in order to hold space for others who have, experienced harm. And how do we bring this healing field and balance back to, one's experience when they've been basically ungrounded by another person, or community, or through spiritual abuse or relational abuse. So yeah, I have direct experience with just being the target of abuse, including spiritual abuse, being in a community that winds up being a cult that I wasn't really clued in to begin with. And then just coming through relational healing and to, supporting others and disentangling themselves from abusive and harmful relationships, including spiritual abuse, as well as facilitating, creating ground and internal support for walking forward, just more internalized support in relationship. Yeah, and it's interesting because just even walking here today, I've had someone reach out to me about this needing help with disentangling from an abusive energy, narcissistic in nature, and so my internal warrior is a little bit tuned up right now around it, and creating a field of protection and connection and grounding for anyone who might be experiencing an ungrounding relationship that's not healthy and it's disempowering and such. So, some things I want to, share some of my story later if there's more space for it later, but I want to also create space for others to drop in and share their stories and receive connection and validation for it. But some things I really want to note that for this opening, particularly what occurs to me in this moment to just speak out to is just for the empaths out there. And there are different ways of being an empath. You can be a knower, or intellectually just mental and just knowing another experience, or you can be a feeler, just at the heart level, just feeling another experience, or you can be sort of a shapeshifter type who becomes through the knowing, the feeling, and a physical embodiment. So that's a highly sensitive way of being. And so, or if you identify as a highly sensitive person, or even as a neurodivergent who is also pretty highly sensitive receiver, their environment and the space around them. Just want to note that, all of us highly sensitive people and who also might actually have come into being like some sort of caregiver, right? Someone that, because we're so attuned in relationship and highly sensitive and on others' experience, we generally are just highly in tune to intuition and instinct, right? And these are the closest to one's knowing. I mean, it's even coming back to our indigeneity and, just that for thinking about, the future with that topic coming up. But, in my path too is re-indigenizing and decolonizing. And part of that is just coming to realize the ways of knowing that have been invalidated by the Western culture, right? And so with intuition and instinct, which are body-based and heart-based, ways of knowing, and it's the closest to our knowing, where rational knowing is the last stop on, the nervous system circuit, the left brain. But we live in a culture that invalidates any kind of knowing that doesn't have an explanation for it, right? Or a rationality for it, right? And so if you're one of these highly sensitive people who've come through life without support for your gifts of knowing, and because in being invalidated because you didn't have an explanation or a rationality behind it, but it was true, right? So there's an attunement to truth there as well. And this is one of the areas where we might have gaps in our inner support or in our shielding when we come up against an energy that's manipulative, basically, and abusive. And so I just wanted to point out that this is a really gift, but it can, because of the great, big hearts we have and just our vast senses and a feeling of responsibility, because a lot of us wind up being like caregivers, even to maybe a point of detriment because we weren't supported, that we're become caregivers who have no needs, right? We take on that role. We become ungrounded in our ways of caring, and even like our senses of justice, even so, what is right and what is true, and being able to be truth seers, right, truth speakers. This is just one of the ways that can create a little bit of a vulnerability when we're against an energy that can cause a little bit of chaos in that, or through gaslighting or manipulation, right? And so these sorts of relationships just don't start out as abusive. It's just like there's a sort of like love bombing, to create a connection real fast. And thinking of like the cult energies, like, you think you belong, there's a feeling sense there. If it kind of meets an internal need that maybe wasn't met consistently, being a highly sensitive person, and then gradually start to experience sort of our inner landscape being taken away bit by bit. And I like, before I've described it as just like drowning drip by drip, right? We might have the ground underneath us, and then drip, drip in the relationship. It's like, oh, it's just a couple of spatters. Is this something to really rock the boat on? Or is this something to like create, create separation around? It was just a little drip. And, it sort of starts to take away our inner, connection to the truth, that's sort of maybe something that might have been a red flag or a warning for later. You might let go a little bit. And, more drips, you start to get a little puddle around you. But okay, this still drips are coming, and it's like, oh, well, that was weird, but okay. And somehow, in this kind of relationship, it's just kind of like, I guess it's subversive, right? Kind of like energy stealing. And then you might find that you become a peninsula and you don't really quite realize it yet, or then you become an island, and then finally you might realize, oh, I'm under the ocean. And so that might be a point of awakening when you just have no ground at all. And so it's a process, right? And the thing is that in that relationship, especially this cult energy, it's like we start to become conditioned to, because it's done through a relationship that includes shaming and negative consequences, right, for speaking truth, seeing truth, right? And so we start, because we're just getting drowned drip by drip and not really quite noticing it yet, maybe, we start to become a little bit maybe conditioned, especially if it's in a communal type setting, to start avoiding the negative attention and the negative consequences, because the shame is painful. And maybe if we hadn't had the internal support, and now our landscape's being taken out from under us, we start to come away from one of the greatest skills that we have as highly attuned caregiver type people, which is truth, right? And so once an awakening happens, and hopefully it happens, right, somewhere along the journey, you find that the ground has been lost. But as I said before, relational wounding takes relational healing, and entering a relationally healing, supportive, connection with someone can help you reground and start to identify the pieces within, where there might be gaps in your internal support, where you've needed validation, where you haven't been constantly invalidated, right? And that's another thing I found in the, healing culture, ungrounded healing culture, is like there's a straight message that gets put across, validate yourself, right? And it's really influenced by this Western, hyper individuality, that we drive for hyper independence, and it kind of skips the steps in that are come before independence, which is really interdependence. And so someone who is internally supported, or like self-validation, they've internalized support through an independent connection that validated them, right? And so that would be one way of creating ground right back, like that you can, like your own inner support. And just to come back to that word grounding, that's another healing culture term that's out there, but no one really understands what that actually, how you actually do that. But it's just really, how do you create support within yourself to, root down to the ground, whatever your experience is. And so, yeah, I just wanted to share these as a possible like overview of what this kind of like experience might be, and how one can create connection and towards healing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Benjamin.
Hi, I'm Benjamin. I'm I'm a psychic, a reader. I do Reiki, all different kinds of healing modalities, and It's really just all of the work that I do really comes out of, what the individual needs. And so, I definitely would say that, I do a little bit of everything in a sense that, every person can need something different. And when it comes to, what is spiritual abuse for me personally, it's really what it is it's abuse, right? And it's just, coming from a place of spirituality, coming from a place of religion. There's certain levels of abuse that have been, made okay because it's spiritual, or it's in the Bible, or it's in this text from ancient times, or it's this and it's that. And it's really about, in a sense, just another level of, manipulating others and keeping them disempowered and keeping them from trusting their intuition and their feelings and their knowing. It's about, and even if it is actual truth, like that doesn't mean that it's balanced. That doesn't mean that it's truth for everyone. And so in that sense, it's really, I grew up in a Christian cult. And that was about saving the world and saving everyone from the demons and the devil. And we all see this in movies and things like that. But it's really, any kind of institution in general that's saving the world is unbalanced, and I think there's a piece where, as an individual, I, grew up and I rejected my mother's religion, basically, and kind of went to search in my own way because the answers the questions I was asking were not being answered in the way that I needed. And so when I went out into the world, and sought other spirituality, paganism, new age to, I grew up also going to powwow, intertribal powwow, because my father is part Native American, and we grew up, and that was another gateway to another sort of spiritual practice as well. And kind of that opening sort of happened. And as I sort of went on, I actually was drawn to other sort of cults that I didn't realize as well, because it was already in my mind. So my mind was like programmed to seek cults, to seek a certain level of, something that these cults had, and is saving the world, and, sacrificing yourself, and, giving to a higher purpose, and, and this feeling like you're meant for something more and something bigger than who you are. And those are all very beautiful feelings, but excuse me, in a sense, when it comes to, spiritual abuse, you grow up a certain way and you don't realize that that's how you've become. And even if you hate these things or reject these things that you experienced, it's become deeply psychological for you. And so I found myself I found a Golden Dawn cult, and I'm a witch and a pagan and an occultist, but they were the same thing as everything else. And you get deeper into this sort of thing, and you belong, and you're serving this purpose of saving the world and empowering others and all this sort of stuff, masked in this sort of thing where, I was in the cult for 10 years and spent, hundreds of thousands of dollars on trainings and traveling all around the world and doing all the stuff that I thought was changing the whole world. And it was an MLM marketing cult. And the closer that I get closer to that spiritual top and to that next class and to that next thing that's going to make everything work, you realize that, power corrupts. And if you don't know yourself, and you're not putting in that work of knowing yourself and doing what the occultists call the great work, which is know thyself. If you're not doing that work, anyone can be handed a certain level of power in any sort of situation, and it can become corrupt. And so in that sense, it's all about, when it comes to spiritual abuse, it's also like anything else, like the popular kids in high school and how they rag on each other and they abuse each other in a certain way, to keep a certain level of popularity. But that applies to everything. right? So there's this piece where, when you're walking, this path, it's really about knowing yourself, and it's really about trusting yourself. So the work that I do is around almost like deprogramming yourself, because, when you're learning something new, when you go through an experience, real learning is actually unlearning. And it's about reconnecting to who you are and reconnecting to those feelings, reconnecting to that inner knowing, and doing that work to understand that, like, and there's a big thing, especially with traditions, especially with, lineage-based healing and teaching, initiatory practices, British traditional witchcraft, which I'm a member of, for example, all these sort of things. It's, and people are saying, oh, well, this is the purest source, and this is the purest thing, and we have the highest, shiniest crystal, and you have to walk this path and do this thing the way we did it, in this way, and disregard all these other feelings and experiences you're having, because this is the goal, right? And having this sort of part of yourself, almost like following this tried and true path. But the thing is, you can have two people next to each other, and they may be these great spiritual leaders and teachers. They may be a third degree high priest or priestess of a coven, or whatever it is that they're doing. They could be a Reiki master, right? They could be this person who's had all these prestigious things piled on top of them. But if you're not doing your personal inner work, it's just like, that's where, that sort of space is really about, if you hand two different people the same thing, they're going to do something completely different with it. Is this person running on inner child wounds? Is this person running on, all these, unfulfilled needs and desires and wants, right? And, or is it, fulfilling some kind of like ego desire that these people have? And how is all of this amazing spiritual teaching and awareness integrating into each person? And that's on the work they've done personally on themselves, connecting with themselves, trusting themselves, right? Looking at their inner child, going to therapy, you know what I mean? Like doing the work that's necessary to really, integrate all of this, so that, if you come to a place where you want to be a spiritual healer and a leader, it's really more than anything in this path. Like, I was part of cults. I was, spiritually abused in certain ways, but at the same time, I also have to look in the mirror and say, hey, I'm a spiritual abuser as well, because that's the way I learned to survive. That's the way that I integrated, life. And it was that I'm spiritually abusing others because that's how I learned to. And so in order to kind of shift all of that, there's so much work that kind of needs to be done, that coming home and that looking in the mirror upon yourself, so that when you are handed this great responsibility of serving others, it's not just a way of serving yourself and your ego, right? And so when it comes to spiritual abuse, it can be something like the popular kid, abusing the other person and saying bad things. They always, in the Bible, right? And all these spiritual things, it's guilt, it's shame. Like, it's still, just because it's spiritual doesn't mean that it's okay, right? And so, it's really about, I would say personally, my service to others really isn't that I'm, leading as much as I'm walking beside each person, and that I'm walking that path of knowing myself and looking internally on who I am, and doing the things that I personally need to do and doing my personal work. Because, in that sense, it's like we're just doing that together, and we can't be 100% perfect or idealistic in a spiritual sense, because a lot of spiritual things are, but it's about having, that sense of like taking each individual step and walking that path together with others, who have been through something similar, that need to rebuild and reconnect, So yeah, I hope that was helpful for others.
Yeah. So I just put up somebody's comment, somebody I know, actually. The shaming can be intense, being on the receiving end. This one is, I'm assuming, somebody that Ben.
Yes, yes.
So,
Hi, Christian.
and you can find Benjamin at reclaimthyself.com. And now I'm going to give this a shot. And again, we all have different perspectives, and places we cross and places where we see things differently, and that's what makes the world go round. I really try to break out spiritual abuse and not entwine it with emotional abuse, mental abuse, and physical abuse. To me, spiritual abuse is when they are abusing you through some connection with a desire to have a relationship with God. God, goddess, Allah, Buddha, universe, great spirit, great pumpkin. I don't care what you call it. But to me, the spiritual abuse has a history line that goes back since the beginning of recorded history, and yet has been always acceptable because it was done in the name of the person's best interest. And there are people who, may hide their own narcissistic tendencies with religion, but it's the religion. It's, to me, I look at spiritual abuse as, those religions that have cult-like qualities, whether they're Christian, Buddhist, Muslim, Jewish, pagan, New Age, Old Age. I don't care. If there is that connection that is happening, that basically they're trying to say, you need me to find the way, the master. I always say right off the bat, the first time anybody that you're studying anything, any church you're going, anytime they go, we are the way and the only way, get up and leave, run, do not walk, run to the closest exit and get out, because that is the beginning of indoctrination. And we, as young children, very early on, are taught over and over again to not trust ourselves, that we are not enough, that somehow we need this person to talk to God for us, that we need to have some interconnection. One of the things, that I look at when was as you had that breakout from your very traditional Usui Reiki into what became a free-for-all renegade Reiki. And when I was fascinated by the history, because I didn't want to study Reiki. When I got the message from Spirit to study Reiki, I didn't want to study Reiki. And at that point, had been working for a couple of years as a spiritual catalyst, having a spiritual based kind of, you almost would think therapeutic therapy kind of idea, though I'm not a licensed mental health therapist. But, that kind of process from a spiritual perspective. And when I started getting the messages from Spirit to study Reiki, I had Reiki masters that were in my practice that I was helping to try to get their lives going or on track or whatever. And I remember sitting in my meditation going to Spirit. Every Reiki master I know has a dysfunctional life, except when they're the Reiki master. I said, do I have to have a dysfunctional life to study Reiki? Is that like a prerequisite for it? Because that was my impression, that I would have these people, that they would have these, struggling, horrible lives. And then they'd talk about, I'm a Reiki master. And everything would change for that moment. And I was like, I don't know what this thing Reiki is, but I took my guidance and I studied Reiki, and I was at that time, the Diane Stein book was just coming out and people were like running around with Reiki, and the Reiki people were horrified. But what I pieced together, and I'm using this as an example of spiritual abuse, is many of the early founders in this country, when we go from Takata to Phyllis Framoto, we're over here, and they're talking about the teachings of Usui. They created a matriarchal version of the Catholic Church that abused them. There was all sorts of genuflecting involved, and there was all sorts of control, and there was all sorts of, and I would hear things that, because I went from studying Reiki, becoming a Reiki master, to channeling what became my book, The Lost Steps of Reiki, which looked at it from a whole different perspective, of a much more ancient perspective of it. But what I noticed was you had these women who were very disempowered by the patriarchal churches turning around. And then, I would hear these horror stories of, it's very secret and you can't show it and you can't do this. And, I got thrown out of my class because I spent more than 3 minutes on a hand position. It was an effrontery to the Reiki if you spent 3.5 minutes on a hand, and it was all about and I'd be told stories about, well, I had to go study all over again because my master's fell off the path, which means I lost my connection, so I couldn't do it anymore. Oy vey. I was like, you're kidding me. And so when I look at spiritual abuse, it's taking advantage of the fact that so few children ever get told, honey, you got a direct line to God. You don't need anybody else. Nobody has to tell you anything if you just open up and allow yourself to be present with it. But the spiritual abuse comes in, I always say that when people will talk about, discovering, I like to talk about souls as being cells in the body of God. And when we are in our journey at some point, if we're lucky, we realize, well, so if I'm a cell in the body of God, that means I'm God, because this cell in my baby Pinky is my cell and it's me, right? I mean, Benjamin, you might be the cell in God's left ear. Raina, you might be in the left elbow. I know I'm a cell in God's butt because I'm a pain in this lifetime from that position, whatever I do. So in that, when we move from, if we get to that point, the problem man has always had is, oh, well, if I'm divine, if I'm God, well, then you have to listen to me and I'm your God and I'm going to tell you the right thing to do. And that's when men blows it every time, or humanity blows it every time when they try to force their relationship with the divine onto somebody else. And I think coming together with a community is powerful. Not all religions, not all subsets of religions are cults, but a majority follow the checklist of being a cult. And anybody that tells you, oh, you're not worthy of God's attention, you're less than the sand under God's foot, you were born bad and you should be begging for, all cult, all spiritual abuse. It basically imprints you with the fact of needing somebody else so you don't fall to your baser nature. And I see it on the Reiki side, the New Age side. That's, I've seen a lot of cults, but I look at it and there's no bigger cults than some of these, especially like Christian nationalism, evangelical, anybody that sets you up that you are better than everybody else, and but only when you're part of us. I mean, I have helped recovering Catholics, recovering Baptists, recovering Mormons, and the amount that these religions, and I could go on and on and on, I'm not trying to pick out anybody, but they get into your head and make you basically feel like you are incapable, you are unworthy to actually talk to God. That's spiritual abuse. That is abusing your relationship with your own divine self, because somebody is on a power trip, somebody is on a control trip, and somebody wants to profit off of you. There's always profit involved somewhere along the line. You said you paid thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of classes. I had a group that I went in and worked with in Switzerland, on the borderline of Switzerland, France. And I was going over to teach the Wei Qi, which is the healing system I teach based on these channel messages. And over there, they had read my book. Somebody had flown over, spent some time with me. Then they flew me over to Switzerland for 6 weeks. And they wanted me to make Reiki masters because the Reiki masters in the area kept on inventing new levels of class and would not make them Reiki masters and teachers because they did competition. I found the same thing happening 10 years earlier than that in New Orleans, that there was a whole group of, oh, well, now here is the 12th level of Reiki you need to learn before we can even think of telling you you could be a Reiki master. You're now going to draw a mandala for $750 for the day. Cult. And it's abusing your desire that we all have to be united with something greater than ourselves. Whether we call it God, Goddess, Ale, Buddha, whatever we call it, it's still this desire to be connected and be more. You know, in some ways, I was lucky because I was raised Unitarian Universalist, not a cult religion. Because one of the things that makes you a cult is you can't ask questions. And all that UUs do is ask questions. You have 5 UUs, they say, you'll get 15 answers to the same question. 15 different answers to the same question. I guess I could elaborate. But it basically leaves the person vaguely. I feel like when you are if you have lived a life where you have been spiritually abused, or you are currently being spiritually abused, you're living a life where you are constantly fighting against some form of depression. Because depression are emotions. All it is it's emotions turned inwards. I used to hear a definition of depression as anger turned inward, but it's really any emotion. You can become depressed if you're too bright and happy and you keep on not being able to be bright and happy. You keep on getting shut down. You know, Quakers meeting now begun. No more laughter, no more fun. If you show your teeth or tongue, you must pay a forfeit. Do either of you remember that? And I don't actually consider Quakers. Actually, I like a lot about Quaker, but you know, that was the thing in a kid. All we knew about was the guy on the box with the oats. But you know, what can I say? So when the reason I wanted to have this topic is I think a lot of people out there don't understand the depth at which their self-worth issues, their self-esteem issues, their motivation issues, their depression issues, even their anger or their anxiety issues come from this inherent message of you're not good enough to be loved by God or spirit or the whatever you have put up on that pedestal, the grand poobah master of nothing, fill in the blank, and that somehow you are the lowly servant, which is not really deserving. And oftentimes the hardest working person in the room carrying their friggin' weight, because no one wants to say the emperor has no clothes, but everybody knows they don't because they have everybody else do everything. But I think that we have a lot of conditions that people struggle with mental and emotional, and those lead to health issues as well that come from having a spiritually abusive. And abusive equates oppressive. Oppressive is abusive. And to be told that you are inherently unsavable, or you are inherently never going to be good enough, or that you inherently should despise yourself, or that and then there are those religions that say even if you think of it, you've committed the sin because the thought entered your head. because I don't want you to think. So if you're not thinking, because I want you to just follow, they want you to just act. I am inviting at this time for the audience to ask questions. I don't, we got a couple of comments. We didn't get any real questions. I'm hoping we get some questions. If not, we're going to just be chatting between the three of us. And we will do so. We'll do so till the top of the hour. We are willing to go to 7:30 Eastern time. But if we're chatting for the next 15 minutes and we don't have any questions from the audience, we may also wrap it early. It all depends. We do these sips for you to ask questions. And for those of you who will be watching this on a replay on YouTube, catch it because it's being housed anywhere, everywhere. Again, you can always reach out to me, Kevin, at kevinrossemery.com. You can always reach out to Raina at The Pearl's Flame. You can always reach out to Benjamin at Reclaim Thyself. I'm going to have fun just going back and forth, making these little bars change. One must amuse oneself. But this is the time, and I'm going to go up. I've got a comment. Okay, so I'm going to show the comment so everybody can read it. It's a big comment. Something I've struggled with for a large part of my life. When there is a disagreement or misunderstanding and one person walks away, they are done with the relationship, and the other person, me, wants to have a conversation, at the very least clear the air, just clear the air. But the other person is long gone. In some native traditions, I've heard that when someone strays, they're placed in the center of the tribe, and each member of the tribe takes turns saying something loving. Okay, who would like to comment on that? And we all three can comment on it. I'm going to leave the question up while we're discussing it. Either one of you have any comment for either one of these?
I'm sitting with it, just dropping in with it in my feely senses. Oh, there's more to the comment.
There's more to the comment, and I guess it didn't all pop up because she just told me that it's more to the comment. I am trying to see if I can see what that is. Hide. Okay. Yeah, it stopped at loving, and we didn't get any more than that. I don't know if I can pick it up on Facebook or if you can put it in a separate comment. Obviously, we are controlled by the great Facebook control freaks about how many words they're going to let show up to us on the comment. So if you want to add to that, I think you're going to have to type it separately. So this is something I'm learning. We've not had this situation before. I'm going to wait to see if she's going to take the rest of the comment that did not show up on our list and give it to us so we can read it, and you can continue to drop in on it, Raina. And again, Benjamin, you're welcome to respond to it, and I certainly will respond to it. But if you are writing comments and they're longer than a paragraph, you may want to send them separately because we won't get the whole thing. Anastasia, are you finishing the rest of the comment? So I'm going to, Raina, did you want to comment on what you wrote so far? Are you ready?
Yeah, it's coming in. Just from what's. Ooh, there's more.
Here we go.
Maybe we should. Okay.
In some native traditions, I've heard they place the center of the tribe, and each member of the tribe takes turn loving about the person until the person in the middle feels whole again. I resonate to this. Is it completely naive to think that all can be healed, that reconciliation can occur? So, she gave us the reference. Her question is, however, do we feel, is she naive to think she can be healed and that reconciliation can occur? So that's the actual question. So if you want to answer that question.
So I do recognize there's more.
Any thoughts, any suggestions, or where I am now to do my own inner spiritual work or on my programs and with the issue and let it go. If this is on topic, this is stemming from my speaking my truth and having people walk away, something they don't like, something triggers them. Thanks. If it is on topic. I don't care if it's on topic or not. We're going to answer it anyway. So there. I run the damn show. We'll do what we want. So if you want to.
Yeah.
It's a good question. I think it deserves an answer. So are you ready to?
Yeah. So I recognize the importance of being witnessed in your struggle, and being held, feeling listened to and understood. Just being held and witnessed can do a lot towards bringing healing to your experience of it. In terms of like other people walking away, if they're not willing to be in connection with you, and it is a difficulty because it does create that sort of tear. But the healing in that case is not necessarily in like enforcing a relationship. Sometimes the healing is, in finding the space, in the healing relationship and the support from another place where that can fulfill that need. And yeah, definitely, when you speak of the Native tradition, being held in circle, it just makes me think of this healing ceremony where, an indigenous mindset, we are all made of each other, right? There's a sort of, in my Filipino heritage and lineage, we have this word called kapwa, right? And that means the shared inner self. And there's something healing about having this connection where, in Western culture, we have that hyper independence, and there's that sensibility has been sort of like dissociated from our experience, right? And so being held through this sort of indigenous type of ceremony is healing. And I know of like one such ceremony. If warriors go out to war, they come back, they're held in circle, and they enact the energies of what they went through. And so like everyone gets the benefit, I'll say benefit of the struggle or the pain, and it's a shared experience of of honoring what they went through on their behalf or the community's behalf, right? And it creates a healing field in that we are all in it together. And that's what I said in the beginning. That creates a healing field. And so whereas in the individual relationship where someone walks away, there's not really something you do to force that to create, and maybe you're not intending it to be a forced thing, but there's a sense of wanting it to, a reconciliation through some direct contact with them. But if they're not unwilling, it'll need to come through a different kind of another relational healing connection and support. And and it's not naive to think that all can be healed, and but maybe not hold the expectation that someone come back into the connection with you when they're not ready, and who knows if they ever would be. You can release that with some sort of love, and also receiving connection and support for oneself, and going through that process of coming to the place of eventually just finding the release of that connection or that relationship that was torn. But for every single thing that can bring healing, if it's not totally whole, it all leads to it all accumulates for each healing. It all accumulates until you do have that breakthrough to the wholeness.
Benjamin, did you want to comment, or did you?
So I think that was a wonderful answer. I definitely feel like the only thing that I would, add is, the experience of, when something ends in a way that feels unfinished to you, that can really, you're holding, like a space within yourself for that. You're holding a connection. There's a what if sort of answer there. There's a, how could you leave it like that? But you think about it, if you think about someone you're close to who dies suddenly, for example, and maybe there was an argument you had, the day before, or maybe there's, maybe it's a parent and they never validated you in the way that you've been seeking your entire life, and now they passed away, and there's always going to be that connection, and so at first it starts with finding that space within yourself that is unbalanced, and is seeking that reconciliation, which is a reunion of, a relationship of, coming together in love and agreement. But we're never really going to agree with everyone about everything else. And if it's strong enough in you and you're speaking your truth and they're walking away, what you're really doing is you're setting boundaries with these people. And if they want to be in your life, and they want to be part of who you are, it's, and have a healthy relationship with you at some point, right? There's that piece where you have to kind of say, well, when you're speaking your truth, you're literally just saying, hey, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm feeling, this is what's going on. And, if they can't accept that, it's up to them to figure that out. And now it's time to kind of find that part of yourself that feels imbalanced and unresolved and do that work on yourself. We have our parents to love us and take care of us if we're lucky. And, in that sense, it's almost like now we have to kind of start looking at ourselves and parenting ourselves in the same way, where we can look in on this part of ourselves and say, well, why does this feel imbalanced? And connecting in with your body, within your senses, within, your feelings, and really saying, well, how can I come to a resolution within myself without needing that other person? Or is there a person who does agree with me or validates me? Are there relationships out there where they do, have that peace, where you can have that sort of peace? But it really starts in here, in that space of imbalance within you that you can resolve.
So there's a couple of things I want to comment on here. The first thing is, healing is to make whole. Whole is about stepping into more of the reality of who you are. So any experience that we turn from an experience into an understanding and embrace it to a point where we have integrated and become more because of it, we take what I call the journey of wisdom. It's wisdom when whatever the experience had to teach you, you learned, not just learned, but embodied, and then became different because of it in a way that is even more in alignment with who you are. You became more you. I had the problem in my 20s a couple of times, more with friends than with lovers, though it did happen, a couple of times with lovers. But I had some very intense best friends who literally were like, I can't do this anymore, and we're gone, like gone. And this is pre-internet. I'm old. So I mean, like, they were gone and they disappeared. I had two different people that I was dating that literally gone. Like, I love you so much it scares me, so I can't see you anymore. Gone. So I went through that a lot in my 20s, and I had to keep on coming back in my 30s because I held the wounds. But, in my 30s is when I started this practice. And part of me being in integrity of doing what I do is there's nothing I say to my clients, or nothing that I do with my clients that I don't do to myself, that I don't put myself through that same process of understanding or poking at things to get a greater understanding or to help facilitate. So naive is, yeah, irrelevant. I just, there's nothing about this. This is naive, naive. The reconciliation is within yourself. One of the things I had to learn was I had to release the expectations that people were going to live life according to my rules. No matter how much they made sense to me, no matter how fair they felt. Some people cannot get into the weeds with you. Some people cannot go someplace. Whatever may have happened that may have triggered them, may have set them into their own wound or trauma, may have created their own fear or fear response, whatever it was, you can, I mean, I reached a point that if, and I don't have this happen to me anymore, actually, because I believe I had it happen, so I didn't need to have it happen anymore because I actually went into it and went through the process. When we learn an experience and embody it and create wisdom out of it, we stop drawing it to us. And even if there's a brush by, it's irrelevant because we're already way beyond it. We don't have to have that anymore. My first step, though, if somebody pulls away and doesn't want to communicate, is I feel sad for them. I feel sad that they're stuck in a place where their fear, their drama, their trauma, their wounds, whatever it was, had more control over them or defined them more and was more important in a way than our relationship. And I don't take that personally. 34 years of dealing with people's traumas, there's some scary shit out there. And when you get in it enough with enough different people, you start to actually have a compassion that we don't know people's story. I don't even pretend to know all of my clients' stories, even if I've been working with them for a while and they've told me all their stories. They've told me all their stories they can tell me. That doesn't mean I've heard all their stories. And so to me, the first thing is reconcile in yourself by releasing the expectations they have to play by your rules. Second, if you're going to engage people to help heal you in the process, if you want to do this Native American thing and that feels healing to you, that's fine. I feel, and this may be part of it, I don't know, and I don't understand enough, so I'm just going to say it because I don't want to make any assumptions. If I'm going to engage somebody in part of my healing and growth process, I want it to be a healing and growth process. And so I want them to tell me, what did they observe? I don't want them to say, oh, yes, poor you poor victim there. It's so horrible. They should be, 20 lashes with a wet doodle. Well, that's useless. I mean, it may feel good for 5 seconds, but really go, if you had a friend that you've been talking to as this relationship was sliding in and out of focus, say, what stood out to you? What did you observe? Invite them to be honest. Don't take anything personally. Actually go into it with curiosity and a desire to learn and grow from the experience and to eliminate the need to actually have it again because you didn't get everything you needed to get the first time around. So I really look at it as, if that healing ceremony feels good to you, do it. I am concerned if that's all that you do, that you will invite the situation back in, because I don't think that the ceremony in of itself may make you feel better in the moment, but it doesn't answer the question, what was I supposed to get out of this experience? What do I need to realize about myself? Where did I co-create any of that reality along the way? And I'm going to share a story out of my own life about this for a moment. probably close to 20 years ago now. I was involved with somebody in a long-term relationship, and I noticed that they would always wait to talk to me about something that they knew we were going to disagree on. There was going to be some kind of push and pull. They would always wait until I'd had a very long day at work, until I was coming home exhausted, until sometimes my eyes could barely stay open. And that's when they'd jump me with the, can we talk about this? And I'd be like, really now? Yeah, I really need to talk about it now. Okay. And I expressed, I have a problem with, it happened after having a few times. I said, I really have a problem with this. And then that relationship came to a close, and I ended up in another relationship, and that new person did the same thing to me. And then by the third relationship, where I had manifested somebody who would wait until I was like, oh, before they'd ask me, before they'd get into a heavy conversation or whatever. And I finally pushed enough, and this person was self-aware enough that they could tell me why they did it. The first two couldn't. This one said, it's the only way that I stand a chance. You are so good at debating. You are so good at discussing things. If I bring something up and I know that there's going to be a resistance in you, you will just school me and take me to town, because I am not as verbally, have your verbal skills, your verbal acuity. And my verbal acuity is something that's very valuable in my practice, very valuable in my teaching, very valuable in my public speaking, very valuable in many places, but it shouldn't be used as a weapon against my significant other. And I never thought of it as I was weaponizing it. And I'm not saying that you did that, but I have heard from couples I've worked with and or friendships or relationships that gone south, that the person that didn't want to talk to you anymore was because instead of listening, you defended yourself, or you got even, or you engage in a way where they're like, they don't hear me. They just don't hear me. And I'm not saying you do that, but I'm just giving you an example that if you were to seek out, and one of my best friends at the time, as this was brought, and I was like, I don't think that's fair. And she goes, oh, please, you are so much more self-aware than that. You know you can be like that. What makes you think that you're not going to be like that in your personal relationship? You would not even think about it. And she held me to task. She was a really good friend. And she backed up what my significant other said. So again, if you have people that you care about, that you trust to be truthful with you, break it down with them. Listen to what they have to say. Go, where did I maybe co-create it? I had somebody else tell me that they when they left, they needed to leave because anytime they tried to talk about it, the other person would get emotional. They'd get crying. There'd be drama. There would be, suicide attempts, spoken, not actualized. So they're like, I just have to leave. So as you can acknowledge that maybe they're just triggered and wounded, and like a wounded animal, they feel in a corner, and it may and they need to run away. You may also need to look at, where did I at any point co-create a reality where maybe they don't feel like that they can safely talk to me or be heard or whatever. What is their side of the coin? Always remember, there are no black and whites. Nobody gets to be the ultimate, I was wronged, and nobody gets to be the ultimate, I'm the villain. Everything's shades of gray. Any other questions?
Go ahead. If I could just something else dropped in too, as you're all talking, is when, I just was originally seeing that needing to clear the air. And I'm just have a curiosity if there's a sort of attachment to a sense of justice, or a need for some kind of justice in order to feel like, they've been hurt or something. So I just that element of justice, I'm curious about if that's up for the person.
And if you want to respond, if you want to say anything else, now is your time. If not, I'm going to see what any of my panelists would like to add to what they've already said. And I'm going to do it as a say your closing piece, and if no questions come up, then we'll wrap down the conversation. Raina, we started with you, so I'm going to throw it to you. Is there things you would like to add, share? Now is the time.
I just really appreciate this conversation, creating opportunity, and something that comes up to me too is like as part of the process of being a witness and holding experience and giving connection to someone who is in an experience, and it's also about walking with the person to find the part within themselves that they can start to ground and internalize support and realization, the aspect of them that already inherently knows how to connect to wholeness.
Benjamin, anything else you want to share? Closing ideas or thoughts?
Raina, everything that was in my head, Raina kind of brought through. So I feel like the biggest piece too is when you talk about being spiritual or walking a spiritual path, you need people in your life who are going to tell you the truth with love. You need people in your life when you get a little bit high on your horse to say, hey, wait a minute, whoa, what's going on? And know that, and not take that personally, but understand that that's how we keep each other in check, because no one's perfect. No one has the right answer. No one is 100% right or 100% wrong, but it's about that piece where you can have someone that it's not coming from a personal place, but it's coming from if you say that you're speaking the truth and you're becoming this truth sayer, right? And seeing it's also about surrounding yourself with people who are also truth sayers, and they're not doing it as a personal attack, but it's keeping everyone present, keeping everyone from getting a little too high on their horse or too right about something, where they and in that sense, community is very important, and it's hard to have someone you're in a romantic relationship play that role, because that can be very difficult. But it's people like us as art can be that for you as well. It's there's a difference between maybe having a psychic reading with someone, and having a psychic reading with perhaps these panelists here, where we're not going to just tell you what you want to hear, what Aunt Betsy is saying to you, or where she hid the jewelry, or whatever it is. We're going to be that person, in our own authenticity. We're not going to tell you anything that isn't authentic to us, and we wouldn't say to ourselves, and so I think that's, the biggest thing is to have people to support you in that sense. It could be, someone who's basically a professional, truth sayer, but someone who won't take this personally, and understanding that, everything we say is for your benefit, Thank you.
So so what I'd like to, that's better. Okay. So there's a few things. She did do some responding again. She thanked us all. She said she wasn't seeking out the healing ceremony herself. She did say maybe personal justice, but more than that, it was a total misunderstanding. And I wish they heard what I meant from my heart and not my voice. You know, one of the things I want to say based on that is I don't know how long the relationship was going. I don't know how deep it was, but some people can only go so deep before it starts to hit on their issues. And it doesn't take much for them to jump ship because they're already, bailing water just because they may have commitment issues or intimacy issues or whatever. And, if somebody's looking for an excuse to jump, they will jump. The other hand is, I do a lot of couples catalyst work and working with people, and it's always a blessing if somebody shows you who they are earlier rather than later. I have a hard and fast rule when people talk to me about, like how fast to move in a relationship, how to go, I know this is the one. It's never felt like this before. You hear all of those things, and I go, well, hey, if it's forever, then what's a couple of years? Like 1 year of dating and get through all the holidays and all of the events and all the things that might trigger them and trigger you, and make sure you take a vacation together, see what it's like, and then another year of living together and see what that's like. And you know what? It's the first 2 years of forever. But don't be like buying houses together, walking down aisles together, doing anything that you're going to have to take apart that could be painful, costly, things like this, because you knew it was going to be forever. And oops, forever actually was 18 months. And it lasted 2 years, but the last 6 months really felt like forever. And boy, you couldn't wait to be gone, or want them to be gone. So if it's really forever, if this is your soul, yeah. And she said that these are friendships she's talking about. Same thing. Friendships, good thing to see who they are early on. And though I'm talking romantic about doing that, even in friendships, you invest a little as you go along over some time and make sure you're getting back. You don't say, oh yeah, I'll put in 10,000 hours of my time and goodness and lend you money and bend over backwards and everything I can, because I know you'll do the same for me when I need something. And then you need something and they're, MIA. No. Do a little, you get a little, they build, they weave over time. There is no rush. So thanks for the clarification. I went romantic. I don't know, something you said made me think romantic, but maybe I just thought of you and I thought romance. Who knows, Anastasia? That was a joke. But yeah, friendships is the same way. As far as like wrapping down tonight's topic, whether you're listening to this live, whether you want to get back to any of us, again, you can find Raina at thepearlsflame.com. You can find Benjamin at Reclaim Thyself. Our next sip is on what is indigeneity with Raina, Nancy Smith, Sam Rochette, and myself. And we try to do a sip every month on a different topic. I don't remember what August is, but maybe I think August is animal communication. And you can find me here. And the sips are always being done live now through a couple of different Facebook pages and YouTube. And when the stars align and I can get my panelists to actually do it, it shows up on their stuff too.
I pushed the button and it wouldn't let me.
Yeah.
Literally.
So, but anyways, my closing thoughts on this. If you were raised in a religion that made you feel inadequate, accept the fact there was a level of spiritual abuse there. If you were raised in any kind of religion or belief system that told you being who you are is not okay for any reason, if you were raised in a religion or belief system that says that you are not interesting enough for that grand poobah in the sky to talk directly to you, you experience spiritual abuse. And it may be a little, it may be a lot. But if you're digging into like, and I hear this, my parents were very affirming and told me I could do anything. And I don't know why I still struggle with this. And then I hear, oh, well, I went to a private religious school who basically shoved down my throat how inadequate I was 5 days a week. That might have something to do with it. Right? Just saying. So I'm going to say that I truly believe that there are more people in this country who have experienced some level of spiritual abuse than have not. It is so insidious. It is so inherent. And then you have the real, as my father used to say, Papa always said, the real religious nutcases that are trying to shove their burning cross somewhere in some orifice of yours to, take the demon out. I just walk in churches to see if I can get him to set on fire myself. I mean, that's a great, hey, let's walk in here. Let's see if this place will explode in fire. And then I could walk out in flames. Wouldn't be the first time I was called a flame. Anyways, when you're trying to understand who you are and why you may have certain issues you have, knock on the spiritual abuse door and see if an issue answers. Because it's more likely to than not to. Thank you for joining us. Next sip, July 15th at 6 p.m. What is Indigeneity with Raina Wilson, Nancy Smith, Sam Rochette, and myself. I want to thank Benjamin Kibbe. Am I pronouncing your last name right?
Kibbe.
Yeah. And the Reverend Raina Wilson for joining us for tonight's panel. And I hope that our missing panelist feels better, and maybe we will see her in the future. I am Kevin Ross Emery, and thank you for coming. I'm going to end the stream.